they put it, on the Trump administration from countries here in the Middle East, in the Gulf region especially, that are suffering economically, but of course also around the world, especially with what the Iranians say is that potential chokehold that they have on the Strait of Hormuz and all the hydrocarbons that get shipped through there, Aaron.
So, Fred, I know that today you also were able to witness one of the large gatherings for the pro-government, for people who are celebrating the fact that there is now a new supreme leader. President Trump has just spoken about it. He has said, made it very clear, he's not happy with the choice of the new supreme leader, Muqtada Khamenei. Are you hearing any response there to how he is now framing it, that he's not okay with the choice?
Well, certainly the Iranians are saying that they are the ones who make their own choice of who the supreme leader is going to be. And of course, you had the Council of Experts. And this was announced late last night that Iran has a new supreme leader. And I think also today, some of the events that we witnessed, and especially that giant gathering at Engelab Square, Revolution Square, which of course you visited as well when you were in Iran. That certainly also was meant as a show of force directed at the United States, directed, of course, also at the world, to show that Iran's processes are still intact, that its leadership is intact, and that it is very much still entrenched and in control of the situation. There were definitely many, many people who came to that square. And on the one hand, they were mourning the passing of the former supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, but then also, of course, celebrating and pledging allegiance to the new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, who's of course the son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And there were posters of the new supreme leader that were out there, many people chanting, as they so often do in events like this, death to America and death to Israel. And one of the things that really stood out to us, Aaron, is that the crowd was definitely charged up. We were there on the ground. There were a lot of people who came to us and made a point of screaming death to America towards our position. So there's definitely a lot of anger towards the United States on the ground among the hardline supporters here of the governing structure. But at the same time, you can definitely feel that the authorities are trying to project the fact that they are still in control of the situation here on the ground. And one thing that I think is definitely worth adding is the amount of security forces that we're seeing on the ground here, the checkpoints, but also the amount of security forces that we saw at this event earlier today, which also clearly shows domestically that the state here is still very much capable and still very much has its grip on power.
Breaking news on two fronts, here in the U.S. with a presidential press conference, and in the Middle East as a new day is about to dawn. We saw this Israeli airstrike in Beirut earlier today. Israel has been targeting the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah and says it continues to strike targets after they say Hezbollah fired projectiles into Israel. In Bahrain, Iranian drone attacks injured at least 32, according to authorities, including a 2-month-old baby, 2 young boys, and a 17-year-old girl. It happened on the island city of Sitra, which is near the capital. It's also home to the country's main state-run oil refinery, which was set ablaze by Iranian attacks. This comes, of course, in the wake of Israeli strikes on Iran's oil infrastructure that continued to send clouds of black smoke into Tehran. All of this, combined with Iran placing a near chokehold on Middle East oil in the Straits of Hormuz, has sent shockwaves into the world's oil markets and created the biggest oil disruption in history. The price of oil neared $120 a barrel earlier today, before settling at just under $100, while gas in the U.S. has jumped 51 cents a gallon just in the last week. All of this has created concern in the White House. The president called a hastily arranged press conference this afternoon. It was his first formal press conference 10 days into this war. The president covered a lot of ground, including suggesting the war, which he called an excursion, might be nearing its end.
We've carried out some of the most powerful and complex military strikes and maneuvers the world has ever seen. We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. So involved that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us.
Well, claims that Iran was planning a preemptive attack were contradicted in Pentagon briefings to Capitol Hill lawmakers previously that states Iran was not planning to attack unless struck first. The president also said that Iran was planning to preemptively attack its Gulf neighbors.
If we did not hit them, they were going to take over the Middle East. They had thousands and thousands since their last hit. They had thousands and thousands of missiles and everything else. Most are now destroyed. but they were going to take over the Middle East. Those weapons were aimed at Middle Eastern countries that had nothing to do with this. They were going to take over the Middle East, and they were going to try and destroy Israel. So we stopped it with good timing.
The president also suggested that he approved the military action after the Iranians wouldn't commit to abandoning their nuclear ambitions in negotiations with his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff.
They were not willing to say that. And when Steve called up and he said that to me, I said, well, here we go. Let's do it the hard way.
So, a lot to cover tonight. We have learned the identity of the 7th U.S. service member killed in the line of duty. His name is Army Sergeant Benjamin N. Pennington from Glendale, Kentucky. He was 26 years old. He was injured a week ago at Prince Saudi Arabia. He died yesterday of those injuries. We're expecting his dignified transfer at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware tonight, and we'll bring that to you if it occurs during this hour. Starting off tonight with CNET's Jeremy Diamond in Tel Aviv. How are President Trump's remarks likely to be received in Israel?
Well, Anderson, for days now, Israeli officials have been watching, perplexed, sometimes concerned, as President Trump has offered varying assessments of this current war, of how long it may last, and of what its goals are. And I think after tonight, Israeli officials will at least have a sense that President Trump is along for the ride for at least some time longer, but for how much longer, still very. As President Trump, did not offer the same kind of full-throated backing of the goal of regime change that Israeli officials are certainly seeking. Israeli officials in recent days have indicated that not only are they going for regime change, but they are committed to carrying out this war for as long as that process may ultimately take. President Trump, for his part, talked about preventing Iranian leaders in any capacity whatsoever of developing weaponry that could be used against the United States. That was perhaps his clearest articulation yet of what his end goal is for this war. And so some questions now about the kind of daylight between Israel and the United States on the ultimate aims of this war and for how much longer President Trump will remain committed to it. As he said today, this idea that he could call this war a tremendous success now, but he will continue on with it for a little while longer.
And I understand you have new reporting tonight about Israel considering a deeper incursion into Lebanon.
Yeah, that's right, Anderson. We have been watching as this second front in Israel's war with Iran has very much been heating up. Israel carrying out airstrikes in Lebanon, ordering the evacuation of hundreds of thousands of people in the Lebanese capital, and Hezbollah carrying out not only missile and rocket attacks, drone attacks against communities in northern Israel, killing 2 soldiers, wounding several more in attacks just this past Friday. And now, amid all of that, the Israeli Prime Minister gathered for a security consultation tonight with his security officials to talk about the situation in Lebanon. And one of the ideas on the table was deepening Israel's military presence inside southern Lebanon. We know that Israeli troops currently control several military positions inside Lebanese territory, but it is only, a couple of kilometers inside of southern Lebanon. And now the Israeli military, the Israeli Prime Minister, weighing deepening that military presence with a further ground operation inside of Lebanon. It's not how clear that may go, but it does come as we've been witnessing the massing of tanks and personnel along that northern border. Anderson.
Jeremy Diamond. Jeremy, thanks very much. As we mentioned in Florida today, President Trump spoke about the war with Iran, said the operation may be, quote, pretty well complete, his words. Chief White House correspondent and anchor of The Source, Kaitlan Collins, joins us now. Kaitlan, does the president's timeline track with what you've been hearing from others in the White House?
Well, we've been hearing a lot, Anderson. I mean, even just in the span of a couple of hours from the president himself about how much longer this could go on. Because today, before the markets closed, notably, as we were seeing so much activity in them today with the spike in oil prices, the president was telling CBS News that it was pretty much complete. And then when he came out before the cameras tonight around 6 p.m. Eastern, obviously after the markets had closed, he seemed to be signaling that there is still more to go, that they still have more to do in Iran before their objectives are complete. But it's not really clear exactly exactly what those objectives are in terms of what specifically needs to be done for him to feel that this is over in Iran, because the president has given multiple answers on that front, Anderson. As you know, it is what we've heard from the last several days, including tonight when he was saying that he needs to ensure that Iran doesn't have the ability not only to not strike the United States, but also not strike Israel or other neighboring allies in the region that obviously Iran has been going after in recent days. And so we had heard from the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, on Friday in a taped interview where he said this was only the beginning. And when the president was asked directly about those conflicting messages, you heard him say that both could be true. And he talked about building a great country in Iran, which also goes against what we've heard from Secretary Hegseth, who has said this is not nation building. And so I do think there's still a lot of questions in terms of how much longer this could go on, though the president seemed to be trying to send the message today that it is not much longer. But honestly, it's kind of hard to know because of how many different messages we are getting from the administration on this. 3 hours today, President Trump's messaging on the Iran war sounded at times like the end was near, and at other moments, like the military campaign still has much further to go. The conflicting messages leave us with more questions than answers as we come on the air tonight. But what is clear is that oil and gas prices are spiking, political pressure is growing, and the president used a new word to describe what's happening.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. This was just an excursion into something that had to be done. I mean, this was an excursion that a lot of people wouldn't have done. We're ahead of our initial timeline by a lot. So we're winning very decisively. We're way ahead of schedule.
Excursion definitely seemed to be the word of the day. Was it an attempt to calm the markets? Potentially, because after they closed this afternoon, the president warned reporters during a hastily scheduled press conference that the United States would respond even more forcefully if Iran tried to disrupt the world's energy supply, while simultaneously projecting a short timeline and also suggesting that the reason for this excursion, as the president described it, was more serious than anything that we have heard up until now.
They had thousands and thousands of missiles and everything else. Most are now destroyed. But they were going to take over the Middle East. Those weapons were aimed at Middle Eastern countries that had nothing to do with this. They were going to take over the Middle East, and they were going to try and destroy Israel. So we stopped it with good timing, and we're very proud to be involved in this, and it's going to be ended soon.
Today, we also saw rallies across Iran in support of the new supreme leader, the son of the previous Ayatollah. We'll have a live report on the ground inside Tehran coming up during this hour. Meanwhile, as President Trump today, who has insisted that he be part of selecting Iran's new leader, offered this assessment to reporters on the new Ayatollah Khamenei.
I was disappointed because we think it's going to lead to just more of the same problem for the country. So I was disappointed to see their choice.
During that same press conference, the president was also questioned about who is responsible for the bombing of a girls' school in Iran, southern Iran, on the first day of this war. Over the weekend, he blamed Iran itself for the strike, despite an analysis by CNN and others that indicated it was likely the United States military that was responsible. And asked today about new video that shows a Tomahawk missile hitting the area, President Trump seemed to soften his position. And I should point out, while only a small number of countries like the United States, the UK, and Australia have Tomahawk missiles, it's not a generic weapon. And as far as we know, Iran does not have any of them.
I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries. You know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation, but Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
The Ayatollah was obviously killed in strikes on day one of this war. Will his son be any better, any different? The president is also being confronted with some political pressure about this war at home. It's only the second week, and yet 54% of Americans are opposed to this war, which is pretty stark numbers this early. This is according to an NPR PBS News Marist poll. Those numbers are likely to get worse for the president as oil prices continue to surge. Right now, today, they topped more than $100 a barrel. That was earlier today. These are levels not seen since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Oil tanker traffic in the Strait of Hormuz remains at a standstill because Iran is threatening to attack oil tankers. The president told Fox this weekend, quote, "These ships should go through the Strait of Hormuz and show some guts," unquote. President Trump, whether or not he wants to acknowledge it, is a wartime president. And this news conference will be a big moment in that. Will he take the opportunity to own any mistakes? Will he outline a more clear path or goals or an exit plan? Or to put it in his own words, quote, show some guts. CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh is in Tel Aviv, Israel for us. And Nick, just ahead of the news conference, President Trump spoke with a CBS News reporter and said that the war could end soon. He called it very complete. Obviously, there's some mixed messaging here. We were told it was going to take much longer than 10 days. What more did Trump say? What are you hearing from Israeli officials at this hour?
Yeah, I mean, there have been suggestions from Israeli counterparts that this may be something that goes on a lot longer. In fact, they've been pushing that message, frankly, relentlessly for some time. Is indeed, for moments, was President Trump as well. Remember, 4 to 5 weeks. We heard that a while back. But underlying throughout all of this comparatively brief conflict so far were the consistent concrete goals that President Trump and his officials kept going back to: getting rid of Iran's missiles, its navy, and its nuclear weapons capability or ability to create that. They stayed the kernel of what the US kept going back to, while at times we would have President Trump talking about wanting to have an influence over who the next supreme leader was, demanding unconditional surrender, although his officials then swiftly said he would choose what indeed that actually meant. So he has really always left plenty of room to define the moment in which he wanted to call this quits. And I think from the beginning, many perceived this as something that economic pressure would put toll upon. Of course, also the pressure now that key US Gulf allies are facing with their infrastructure potentially under attack, their economies enormously disrupted. And I think the potential really, as people see this continue to get more protracted, for more unintended consequences to drag in other countries around the globe. Israel's goals always more expansive than the United States. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu clear he wanted democracy. His officials saying they will target the successor of Ali Khamenei, his son, Mujtaba Khamenei. Neither of those two men, particularly from the clerical tradition, but still hardliners indeed. And ultimately, Iran, through this appointment, has done the one thing that President Trump said he wanted them not to do, which is appoint Mujtaba Khamenei. Is he ultimately going to make that some kind of deal breaker with himself or Iran to slow this down? We'll have to wait and see. But I think there are many potentially who assess the White House viewing this as perhaps a sort of slightly more complex version of Venezuela. They've found, obviously, that Iran is to its core in the theocracy anti-American. But ultimately, there will be issues weighing on all sides here. Their inventory, the economic pressures upon them, the damage done to Iran's own commanders here. And so it is interesting to now, on I think the third day really, see President Trump talk about the end here. He talked about unconditional surrender. He talked about the idea of having an influence over who the next supreme leader might indeed be. And today, saying something is very complete, begins to sow the narrative that he feels their goals have been achieved. This could all change in a matter of hours, and there are so many factors on the move here that we could see events remove whatever thought is currently in the president's head. But it is key, I think, to see this consistent reference to how this comes to an end, Jake.
Yeah, speaking of consistent, there has not been a consistent message from the White House in terms of what they're looking for in terms of the next leader of Iran. President Trump said he wants to play a role. He also told Dana Bash on Friday that all that he really cares about is that whoever is in charge is nice to Israel and the United States. No mention of the Iranian people. What do we know about the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, and what role will he play in all of this?
I mean, ultimately, he stepped into a position which has clearly had a lot of infighting occurring around it. He was publicly thought to have been a potential successor to his father. I think many analysts have perceived Iran's form of governance and the corruption around there as likely having enriched Mojtaba Khamenei himself. But clearly a hardliner, absolutely. And this is a figure, obviously now, after the damage done by the United States and Israel, and after the damage done, frankly, to Iranian society after the brutal suppression of protests just as recently as January, will have to find a way of portraying himself as hardline enough to retain grip across the country's fractured security apparatus. That will be exceptionally hard because there'll be much of the administration or apparatus that is hostile to this sort of essentially quite nepotistic practice of turning this into a hereditary theocracy. That's not been part of the Islamic Revolution up until this particular moment. So that is a very awkward moment indeed for Iran. And then, of course, there is the simple fact that Israel was able to kill his father with not ease, but not, you know, they managed to do it, and they've pledged to kill Mojtaba as well. And I think that serious issue will be hanging over his time in power. Jake?
All right, Nick Payton-Walsh in Tel Aviv, Israel. Thank you so much, my old friend. Despite early analysis, President Trump is blaming Iran for last month's deadly strike on an elementary school in the country's southern city of Minab. Yesterday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told Major Garrett of CBS that the strike is still being investigated.
If you could tell the American public it definitively was not us, you would tell us, wouldn't you?
I would say that it's being investigated, which is the only answer I'm prepared to give.
Drone video shows the new grave sites for those killed. At least 192 students and teachers. That's according to Iranian state media. CNN's Isabel Young has the new video evidence now that further suggests that the U.S. may actually have been to blame.
This is the moment a missile slammed into an Iranian base in Minab, a city in southern Iran, just over a week ago. In this freeze frame, you can see it clearly. Weapons experts tell CNN the wings and tail are consistent with a Tomahawk missile. This new video is the clearest evidence yet that suggests it was the United States that struck an elementary school next to that Revolutionary Guards base, killing scores of students. The US has been firing those Tomahawk missiles at Iran from ships and submarines for more than a week now. Israel doesn't use them, experts tell us.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 170?
No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Iran also doesn't use Tomahawk missiles. And using satellite images, it's clear the school was struck nearly simultaneously with strikes on an adjacent Revolutionary Guards base. That suggests precision targeting. CNN geolocated this video. We think this missile struck the military base, not the school. You can see that other buildings in the direction of the school had just been struck when this was filmed. CNN is still trying to gather visual evidence from the ground, and until we see actual remnants from the munitions itself, it's impossible to be definitive. But this is the clearest evidence to date.
Ago, President Trump held a press conference largely focused on Iran. He said the U.S. military operation there is ahead of. He said the U.S. has now struck some 5,000 targets in Iran since the war began.
It's the beginning of building a new country, but they have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. They have no radar, they have no telecommunications, and they have no leadership. It's all gone. So, you could look at that statement. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
Well, what is it? We don't know. We could call it a tremendous success, or we could go further. He did say we will go further, though just a short time before that press conference, he told another reporter that the war there is largely complete. Joining me now, Kristen Holmes from the White House, of course, covers President Trump. Kristen, is the war over or not? Is it clear to you?
I mean, Jim, it sounds like it's not over, but one thing is clear. The comments that President Trump made when he was talking to that reporter that it was completely done were something that, for whatever reason, don't seem to actually stand. When he said that this is pretty much completely done or completely over, now there's a lot of speculation that that might have been because the markets were completely spiraling and his comments actually sent them back up into the green. But whether or not it was that or just him spitballing, I mean, the messaging has been all over the place. And one of the ways that he's been communicating the messaging of this war that the United States is currently in is with these kind of 3 to 5 minute long phone interviews with various reporters where he goes out there and then contradicts himself, a day or even an hour later. So what we did learn in all of this was this idea that President Trump said that they'd struck 5,000 targets. That at one point he said that they were going to go until they completely eradicated their nuclear ambitions. There's a lot of questions about that in particular because that seems pretty subjective in terms of when you could determine that that had been done. And then he also said that they were way ahead of schedule. It seems as though he's leaving the timeline very open-ended here and probably on purpose. Now, I do want to note, Jim, probably the most interesting part of this press conference is when he was asked about that school, the girls' school that was struck in Iran. He seemed to walk back his comments that he made on Air Force One. He had been asked then and said that it was Iran who had done that bombing. And then Pete Hegseth, who was standing right behind him as Secretary of Defense, kind of said it's still an and we're looking at everything, not backing up the president. Now, President Trump during this press conference was asked about it again, and he said it was an ongoing investigation. He kind of walked away from that. It was definitely Iran. He did say, however, it was done by a Tomahawk missile and then claimed that Iran had Tomahawk missiles, which I don't believe that we have any intelligence that shows that they have Tomahawk missiles. But at the end, he said that whatever the report shows or the investigation shows, that's something that he's going to live with. So that was an interesting moment because that was one of the only times we've seen him actually acknowledge and walk back something that he said. What we've seen instead when it comes to this war, this attack in Iran, is just compounding statements over and over again, some of which don't actually agree with each other. But that was one notable walk back.
No, because he may have already been told, right, that the information points in that direction, right, and preparing the groundwork for that. Let me ask you if I can, because the president said that had the U.S. not attacked Iran last year in the operation called Midnight Hammer, that Iran would have a nuclear weapon and would have used it before this press conference, that is before today. Are you aware of any intelligence assessment that the White House has shared to back up that statement?
No, and he also said that first it would have really, Iran would have really taken over the Middle East if it wasn't for Operation Midnight Hammer, which happened back in June. Then he said they were going to take over the Middle East anyway, this time around, if he hadn't struck first, if he and Israel hadn't struck first. That is not any indication that the intel that we have seen or been briefed on by sources who have seen the intelligence, who said that there was nothing imminent, that in terms of a nuclear weapon, it was likely closer to 10 years before they would have a nuclear weapon. And any sort of strikes that Iran was going to make were going to be in retaliation to a strike from America, from Israel, from any country, and that those retaliation strikes would not be preemptive, because obviously retaliation and preemptive are two very different things. But that is different understanding from what President Trump has said out loud. Although behind the scenes, I mean, they have been very clear, White House administration officials, that there is no intelligence that showed that there was going to be an imminent strike or preemptive strikes by Iran. So this just seems to be kind of a boisterous, not true claim from President.
Not true claim. Well fact-checked.
Lead as we wait for President Trump to begin a press conference. He told CBS News just minutes ago that he thinks the Iran war could be over soon. He called it very complete. Let's get to CNN's Kristen Holmes at the White House. Kristen, the Pentagon says we've only just begun. President Trump says it's very complete. What's going on?
Yeah, actually, we saw Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, just moments after President Trump said this to CBS, reposting this tweet that said this is just the beginning. So clearly not on message. Now, I would say that President Trump was dialing it back. This is what he just said to Republicans. Take a listen.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion.
So you have those two things, what he said to CBS and that excursion, short-term excursion, coupled together. Sounds like he's dialing back. But then, just a few minutes later, he said this: "We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory that will end this long-running danger once and for all." There is so much messaging here that is all over the place. And President Trump, part of his strategy has been this, having these kind of 3-minute to 5-minute phone calls with various reporters, talking to them about what the strategy is for the war, and then contradicting himself in the next interview. So what we are going to see in a few moments is President Trump actually taking questions from a full press corps, giving remarks that are just supposed to be about Iran, although, of course, it is President Trump, and perhaps we'll get a more fulsome answer on where exactly all of this stands, because right now there is a lot of mixed messaging here.
Tehran's Mehrabad airport on fire, although it's not clear if the airport was struck directly. Iranian state media reporting explosions from one end of the capital to the other. U.S. Central Command says American forces have now hit more than 3,000 targets inside Iran, and that includes ballistic missile sites and command posts of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Our reporters are covering all of this from various angles. We've got Paula Hancock's joining us from Dubai, but first I want to get to CNN's Jerusalem Bureau Chief Aaron Lieberman in Tel Aviv. Aaron, from what we understand, Israel launching that massive attack on Tehran, and this after we've also heard just a few minutes ago from the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian saying they will not surrender. Take us through the latest there.
Well, what's interesting here about Israel's statement that the latest wave involved 80 fighter jets is that this isn't even the largest wave of attacks we have seen by Israel. They have used more than 100 throughout the course of the first week of the war in simultaneous strikes across parts of the country here. And you can see that that very much continues. In this latest wave of attacks on Iran, Israel says they targeted what they say was the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' military university, as well as a number of other sites, including ballistic missile launchers and ballistic missile arrays. That remains a key target for Israel as we see them work their way down their target list. As you pointed out, U.S. Central Command says they have struck more than 3,000 targets in the first week of the war. Israel said just a couple of days ago that they have struck, I believe, about 2,500 targets. So you get a sense of how large the operation is as it very much continues. The U.S., President Donald Trump, and the Defense Secretary vowed that this effectively would expand and they would see larger and larger strikes as we move into the weekend and as we move into the second week of the war here. Meanwhile, as that happens, we see Iran firing back. What's interesting is that over the course of the last several days, we have seen more of the incoming Iranian ballistic missiles happen several times during the day and the evening. Last night, there were at least 3 rounds of incoming ballistic missile fire in the overnight hours. So Iran at least retaining some ability to launch at Israel. Meanwhile, on the Lebanese front, Israel continues to go after Hezbollah targets there. What's interesting there as well is that Hezbollah media and the Lebanese Ministry of Public Health have said that Israel has conducted commando raids into the country using helicopters and some small number of ground forces that have engaged in firefights with Hezbollah militants. So it seems that Israel is pushing deeper into the country. This isn't a ground incursion or a ground invasion at this point, even as Israel has taken more positions along the Israel-Lebanon border. But we will certainly wait to see where this goes from here. Keep in mind that over the course of the past 48 hours, Israel has issued evacuation warnings for large swaths of southern Lebanon, basically the entire south of the country, as well as large parts of the capital of Beirut and parts of the Bekaa Valley. So Israel has the forces up there as it continues pushing and vows, at least right now, that Hezbollah will be disarmed before they scale back what's happening and the Israeli strikes in Lebanon.
Yeah, Aaron, I just want to bring up this map of all the strikes, the U.S.-Israeli strikes into Iran, and it's quite widespread. You mentioned here that the 80 fighter jets in those pre-dawn strikes in Iran were really targeting ballistic missile sites, military bunkers, and so forth. What is our understanding of the degradation of Iran's military capabilities? Do we have any insight on that?
So we've gotten some of this information from the Israeli military. They say they've targeted somewhere between, and I forget the exact numbers, between 60 and 80% of the ballistic missile launchers, as well as either 60 or 80% of the missile and air defenses. So that's been a key target. That's actually a lot of what has allowed the Israeli Air Force and the American Air Force and American Navy to basically have free reign over large parts of Iran. It's because they were able to take out the air defenses, and that's why you see the Israeli military putting out videos of their fighters over Iran. It's because of that freedom they have to operate. But this has always been an asymmetrical war. Iran was never going to put up its air force and match it fighter to fighter with the U.S. or Israel. Iran's weapons have been their ballistic missiles, and they still have those at least to some extent, as we saw here last night, as well as their one-way attack drones, and then some of their other capabilities. That's what Iran is using here to fight back, as well as their determination to stay in the fight here, and that's what we're seeing on day 8.
Yeah, and Masoud Pezeshkian saying they are not going to surrender. That coming just a short time ago. Oren Lieberman, thank you so much for that update. I want to go live now to CNN's Paula Hancock, who's in Dubai. Good to see you, Paula. I want you to give me a bit of insight into what has happened in Dubai today, the interception, specifically a lot of news out of Dubai airport. What is the latest there?
Yeah, so Eleni, this was a couple of hours ago. We did hear the interceptions. We also heard the alerts, the emergency alerts, telling us to stay inside. And it does appear as though there has been some kind of impact near or in the grounds of Dubai International Airport. We're waiting for official lines on that. What we did hear is that flights were suspended temporarily. We heard from the Dubai Media Office saying that it was for the safety of passengers, airport staff and airline crew. But then just half an hour later, Emirates said that all the flights had resumed, and if you had a flight this afternoon, you could presume it was going to go ahead. Now, we did speak to a resident of Dubai who was inside the airport when the blast happened. Let's listen to what he saw.
Well, shortly after 9 o'clock, we were at the Terminal 3 at Dubai International Airport, and there was a large impact. A lot of smoke could be seen from the glass. It seemed to be within the airport perimeter, but obviously in these situations it's quite difficult to tell. There were vibrations, reverberations. What was extraordinary is that the way the Dubai authorities within the airport reacted. There was professionalism, there was calm, there was no panic. The passengers showed no panic either that I could see.
And certainly that was the case when we were at the airport a few days ago. It was a very calm and organised atmosphere. Now, at this point, it's unclear whether it was a direct hit, whether it was debris from an interception. We certainly have seen a number of drones and missiles continue to be able to impact the Gulf nations. Here in the UAE on Friday, officials said they intercepted 9 ballistic missiles, 101 drones, and they remain on high alert. We also saw in Saudi Arabia that officials there saying that 20 drones were approaching the Sheba oil field when they intercepted them. Also, the Ministry of Defense saying that there were 5 separate waves of attacks since midnight. So even though we are hearing from US officials that the ability of Tehran to be able to retaliate, that the number of ballistic missiles and drones is dramatically reduced from the beginning of this war, they are still able to get some through. And certainly more than 100 drones coming towards the UAE on Friday is still a significant number, but the air defense systems here and also across many of the Gulf nations are working as they should. Well over 90% of what is coming in is being intercepted. Eleni?
I'm going to bring you more now on the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Israeli military says it has struck more than 500 targets since the war began. Jeremy Diamond is in Tel Aviv. And Jeremy, we are seeing huge displacement of people. I think that one NGO putting up more than 500,000. We have seen more than 200 people killed. You were close. You were in the Israeli side of the border. Give us a sense of what you and your team have witnessed today.
Yeah, that's right. A very active situation at the border between Israel and Lebanon. A lot of fire between both sides. We heard everything from artillery strikes, airstrikes, to drone and missile fire from both ends of the border. All of this as this new front in this war between Israel and Iran very much heating up. Oh, wow, that was a drone that seems to have just made impact here. There were no sirens warning, but we just heard an explosion right here in Metula. We're right along the Israel-Lebanon border, and we just heard something come in fast over our heads and make impact. Okay, so we're gonna put our vests on now because we just saw not one but two projectiles coming in. Still not clear exactly what that was, but we're now starting to hear the outgoing Israeli fire responding to it. We're just hearing a lot of activity right now, kind of going in both directions, in fact, as this new front in Israel's war with Iran is very much heating up. So that smoke right there just came from Israeli artillery that was being fired from behind us. So it went over our heads. We then saw it make impact there, and you can see the smoke that's still coming up from the target location. And now, okay.
He's so used to it.
And that was hitting the same spot. Yeah, getting very active here now. Here too. So we're seeing several areas now in southern Lebanon that are being struck by the Israeli military, and some of those positions that they are hitting are within a kilometer of the Israeli-Lebanese border, and that's significant because all of these positions in the most southern part of Lebanon were supposed to have been cleared of Hezbollah fighters over a year ago, and so the fact that Israel is now having to hit positions so close to its border suggests that Hezbollah is trying to re-infiltrate those areas, and obviously Israel now fighting to try and rid those areas of Hezbollah once again. So, Issa, you could see and hear some of those cross-border attacks that took place today. We've now learned from the Israeli military that 8 soldiers were wounded as a result of some of those very same types of attacks today. 5 of them are in serious condition. 3 others were lightly injured, according to the Israeli military. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, we are witnessing the mass displacement of hundreds of thousands of people in the Lebanese capital of Beirut, as the Israeli military yesterday issued this fairly unprecedented order, evacuation order for almost the entirety of the Dahia, those southern suburbs of Beirut that are known to be a Hezbollah stronghold. The Israeli military carrying out intense strikes not only in southern Lebanon, which we could hear from our position today, but also in the capital of Beirut. And the question now is, where is this all headed? We certainly witnessed today an intensification of this aspect of the conflict, and we know that the Israeli military has called up tens of thousands of reservists. They are occupying portions of southern Lebanon. Question now whether they will push even deeper.
I want you to tell me about the latest news, Paula, about interceptions in Dubai this morning and any impact that you can tell us.
Well, Eleni, as you got alerts and heard interceptions overhead in Abu Dhabi, it was a similar situation here in Dubai and also in Sharjah. This is another emirate which has been largely untouched over the past 7 days. They also got an emergency alert. So at this point, we're looking into exactly where points of interception may have been, where points of possible impact may have been, but we are hearing from officials that they remain on high alert for anything that might be incoming. Now, we have been hearing from the US side, from the department, the Pentagon, and also the Joint Chiefs of Staff commander, that the number of missiles and drones that Tehran is able to send has sharply dropped. But here in the Gulf, they are still continuing to be able to launch them. Now, we do know that certainly from the first couple of days of this war, the number of missiles is sharply down. But the number of drones, yesterday, for example, there were more than 100 drones that were intercepted coming to the UAE. And that, of course, is the concern, that Iran is still able to continue targeting these Gulf nations in the way that it has been. Now, Iran does say that they're targeting military targets of the US, they're targeting American political centers. It's very clear they are targeting far more than that, and we have seen those impacts. Dubai with a couple of hotels having impact potentially though from interceptions of missiles or drones rather than a direct hit. We've seen airports being impacted, and energy infrastructure is definitely something we are seeing more of across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia, for example, we know that there were attempted targeting of that this morning. We heard from Saudi Arabia that there were 5 separate waves of attacks since midnight. We seem to be seeing a pickup there. Also 3 missiles intercepted on their way to Prince Sultan Air Base. It's a Saudi military base, but we know in the past US military jets have been housed there. So the ability for Tehran to be able to target the Gulf nations at this point, well lessened from the beginning of this war, from Saturday and Sunday, which was far more intense, is still not being completely cancelled out. We heard from CENTCOM, Central Command in the US, that they had targeted a drone carrier ship from Iran. They say they hit it, it was on fire. But of course, there is still this ability. Eleni?
United Arab Emirates have all intercepted missiles and drones headed towards their countries. CNN senior producer Bijan Hosseini is monitoring all this. He is once again live for us from Doha, Qatar. What's it like there this morning?
Hi, Alex. All things considered, pretty calm here for the time being. We know that in the UAE, within the last 30 minutes, our team members across 3 different cities, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah, have received emergency alerts on their phone that a missile attack is ongoing. So we'll continue to monitor and update you all on that. Attacks being sent into Saudi this morning as well, waves of missile and drone attacks on oil facilities and on the Prince Sultan Air Base. We know, according to Saudi's Ministry of Defense, that those have all been intercepted. In Bahrain, sounds alarms going off this morning for residents there, asking them to seek shelter. We don't have any additional information on hits or how many projectiles have been fired into that country. And we know that Kuwait yesterday saying they shot down 12 drones and 14 missiles. Yesterday here in Qatar, the Ministry of Defense confirming to us that 10 drones were sent to target the country. 9 of those were intercepted. We know that 1 did hit in an uninhabitable area of Qatar, according to the Ministry of Defense. This all comes after U.S. Central Command on Thursday said that Iranian ballistic missile attacks had decreased by 90% and that drone attacks had decreased by 83%. Obviously, in the UAE, they're still getting those alerts. They've been absorbing the brunt of Iran's retaliation. Here in Qatar, as I said, a fairly quiet night, all things considered, from what we've experienced in the last 8 days. We know that Civil Aviation Authority here in the country announced overnight that they're going to partially reopen the airspace here, which of course is a huge relief to the more than 8,000 passengers we know that were stuck here as they were transiting through. Doha's a major airport hub, the Hamad International Airport. And after that announcement of the reopening of the airspace, we heard from Qatar Airways that they would begin operating limited flights from the capital here to 5 major cities: Rome, Paris, Madrid, Frankfurt, and London. So a little bit of a relief for the passengers here, but obviously still attacks incoming for our colleagues in the UAE at the moment.
Yeah, because there was some question about, does Iran have anything left after all of this? And clearly, at least for the time being, they do. Not sure if he can hear us, but
yeah, Alex. Yeah, exactly right. I mean, we haven't seen us. Sorry about that. Just a bit of a delay there. You're exactly right. We have seen, as I said, you know, a brief pause of hostilities here in Qatar, but still every single day, all these Gulf countries, minus Oman, have experienced attacks from Iran. So a bit contradictory to what we've heard from U.S. Central Command. Yeah, but we'll just have to wait and see here, Alex.
Part of southern Lebanon.
Israel says it struck an Iranian command center in Beirut today, amongst other targets. And Lebanon reports at least 217 people have lost their lives in the fighting so far. Jeremy Diamond went up to the border with Israel today, didn't you, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's right. I was along the Israel-Lebanon border, which was a very, very active scene today. Just one cross-border attack after the next, going in both directions. At one point, my team and I saw 2 projectiles flying directly over our heads, hitting a location in Israel very close to our position. Subsequently, we saw Israel responding with one artillery shell after the next. Those were also whooshing over our heads in the other direction, hitting targets inside southern Lebanon that were really not very far from the Israel-Lebanon border. And that was what was really so stunning about this crossfire that we witnessed today, was the fact that it suggests that Hezbollah is re-infiltrating positions that they had abandoned or been forced out of over a year ago amid Israel's attacks on Hezbollah at the time and the ensuing ceasefire that resulted, Lebanon's disarmament of Hezbollah south of the Litani River. All of that seems to have been for naught to a certain extent, given the kind of pace and the intensity of the crossfire that we saw today. In fact, 8 Israeli soldiers were wounded today, 5 of them seriously as a result of one of those Hezbollah attacks on an Israeli military position in northern Israel. Inside Lebanon, of course, we've been witnessing the intensity of Israeli airstrikes there, not only in South Lebanon, some of what we were able to see and hear today along the border, but also in the Lebanese capital of Beirut, where yesterday the Israeli military issued this very widespread evacuation order for almost the entirety of the Dahia, those southern suburbs of Beirut that are considered a Hezbollah stronghold. And then subsequently overnight, the Israeli military carrying out intense airstrikes there, destroying several high-rise buildings. And again, of course, this is deepening a humanitarian crisis in Lebanon, where you now have hundreds of thousands of people out of their homes, some of them living on the streets. And again, it's not clear, how much more this could potentially escalate. We did see Israeli military tanks on the border. Residents in the area told us that they were seeing more and more personnel and materiel moving in towards that border as well. The looming question now, whether Israel will deepen its control of just a thin strip of land in southern Lebanon and go for a broader ground offensive once again.
And what sort of sirens have you been hearing in Tel Aviv tonight, Jeremy?
Well, just moments ago, we had once again air raid sirens sounding, indicating that Iranian ballistic missiles were being fired. We have, of course, seen those barrages diminish in size and scale, as Iran is sometimes firing as much as just a single missile at a time, which makes it a lot easier for Israel's air defenses to be able to intercept that. That's all the result of the U.S. and Israeli strikes on those ballistic missile capabilities. They've destroyed some 60% of those missile launchers that can be used to fire at Israel. And the result of that is that while we've seen shrapnel falling, we've seen a direct impact yesterday that didn't result in any casualties, we haven't seen any casualties in Israel, any fatalities, I should say, since Sunday, since the second day of this war. And so we will see whether or not that holds up, of course. But certainly there's been a major diminishment in Iran's ability to fire these missiles. But now, as this renewed threat of Hezbollah, and at times Iran and Hezbollah coordinating their missile attacks at the same time.
Jeremy, appreciate it. Live in Tel Aviv for us tonight. The Iranian strikes against Gulf states continue, but not at the rate they had been, as Jeremy was describing there for Israel as well. Over the last 24 hours, Iran's ballistic missile attacks have decreased by 90%. US Central Command adds that drone attacks are down by 83%. This as Qatar's air defense says it successfully intercepted a drone attack targeting the US airbase earlier on Friday. Air defenses are also being put to the test in Kuwait, where falling debris has caused some damage. The war is pushing up the price of oil up to some of the highest levels in the past few years. The Energy Minister of Qatar tells the Financial Times that oil prices could hit $150 a barrel within weeks. Oil prices are hitting their highest level since late 2023, and Brent crude prices have gained 9%, hitting $93 per barrel. It's Saudi Arabia, though, that is the big supplier, and Nick Robertson is there for us today to give us a picture of that, that critical oil market.
Yeah, it really is. One of the tests that oil-producing countries like Saudi Arabia, like Kuwait, like the others all face is that their normal production levels, they ship it out. But when they can't ship it out, they have to put it in storage. And there comes a sort of a saturation point for their storage fairly quickly. So they're looking at the situation right now. If there isn't a resolution to the war, and the Trump administration is talking about this maybe taking as long as a couple of months, that really means for them they've got to address their output capacity. This has long-term knock-on effects, or the Straits of Hormuz get opened. But they're also, part of the calculation is, are they going to get drawn into the fight? And although Iran's output of drones and ballistic missiles may be down a little today in Saudi, it's been very focused sort of on one area in particular, Prince Sultan Air Base, just outside of the capital Riyadh here. 3 ballistic missiles intercepted in the early hours of today. And that was the first time, by the way, that Saudi Arabia had actually admitted that it had intercepted ballistic missiles. About an hour or so later, there was a drone fired in pretty much the same area. After that, a cruise missile fired in the same area. After that, 3 drones fired in the same area. All of these intercepted. Then another hour later, after those 3, another drone. And then a few hours ago this evening, after a break of a number of hours in those barrages, a cruise missile was fired in. So Iran really trying to go after that particular airbase. And so, for Saudi Arabia, it's looking at the threat that still exists and this hard dynamic of what to do about its oil production over the longer term. And of course, as we heard from the energy minister in Kuwait, as you were mentioning, this can and will have long-term knock-on economic implications across the globe, and that's a worry.
Dramatic surge in strikes inside the country, in Tehran even. Give us a sense of what the US and Israel have been targeting overnight and throughout the day.
Yeah, that's right, Issa. Well, today alone, the Israeli military says that they have struck over 400 targets in Iran. They are continuing, of course, to hunt those ballistic missile launchers that threaten Israel and its population. We know, of course, that those attacks have been largely successful in destroying at least 60% of Iran's ballistic missile launch capabilities, and has resulted in a reduction of the number of ballistic missiles that Iran is firing towards Israel. In addition to that, we're continuing to see efforts by Israel to go after Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as internal security forces targets as well. And the hunt that Israel is embarking on to kill as many senior Iranian political leaders as possible is also continuing, as the Israeli military is indicating today that they struck a secret bunker of the former supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, which was beneath regime headquarters in central Tehran. The Israeli military releasing a video of this strike and saying that in recent days it appears that this command bunker was being used by some of Iran's current leadership as well. They have yet to actually talk about any specific individuals who they believe they have killed as a result of this strike, but it shows, of course, Israel's continued ability and desire to go after Iran's political leadership, in addition to targeting Iran's military capabilities.
Yeah, and for Israel, this is, of course, as you and I have been discussing, it's a two-pronged war as it takes the fight to Lebanon, where I'm just seeing more than 200 people have died, where almost 500,000 people have been displaced, according to one NGO. Give us a sense of what is happening in Lebanon.
Yeah, well, my team and I were along the Israel-Lebanon border today, and I got to tell you, it was very active, far more active than I even anticipated, especially when you consider the fact that Hezbollah, for over a year was supposed to be gone from the areas closest to Israel, pushed back not only by the Israeli military and continued strikes, some of which continued even during this ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, but also by the Lebanese military, which was in the process of and had claimed success in disarming Hezbollah south of the Litani. But what my team and I saw today suggests a conflict that is only escalating.
Oh,
Wow, that was a drone that seems to have just made impact here. There were no sirens warning, but we just heard an explosion right here in Metula. We're right along the Israel-Lebanon border, and we just heard something come in fast over our heads and make impact. Okay, so we're gonna put our vests on now because we just saw not one but two projectiles coming in. Still not clear exactly what that was, but we're now starting to hear the outgoing Israeli fire responding to it. We're just hearing a lot of activity right now, kind of going in both directions, in fact, as this new front in Israel's war with Iran is very much heating up. So that smoke right there just came from Israeli artillery that was being fired from behind us. So it went over our heads. We then saw it make impact there, and you can see the smoke that's still coming up from the target location. And now, okay.
He's so used to it.
And that was hitting the same spot. Yeah, getting very active here now. Here too. So we're seeing several areas now in southern Lebanon that are being struck by the Israeli military, and some of those positions that they are hitting are within a kilometer of the Israeli-Lebanese border, and that's significant because all of these positions in the most southern part of Lebanon were supposed to have been cleared of Hezbollah fighters over a year ago, and so the fact that Israel is now having to hit positions so close to its border suggests that Hezbollah is trying to re-infiltrate those areas, and obviously Israel now fighting to try and rid those areas of Hezbollah once again. And so as you can see there, Issa, very active crossfire on the Israel-Lebanon border. And today, in fact, Hezbollah was able to seriously wound several Israeli soldiers as a result of some of these attacks. 5 Israeli soldiers in serious condition. 3 additional soldiers were lightly wounded as a result of one of those cross-border attacks. And while we were down there, beyond the projectiles that we ourselves saw, the air raid sirens that went off at one point due to incoming missiles, there were also a number of drone alerts across the northern part of Israel. So this is a front that we need to keep a very, very close eye on, particularly as Israel is issuing all of these evacuation warnings for the southern suburbs of Beirut, for every area south of the Litani River in southern Lebanon, and carrying out intense airstrikes of its own inside Lebanon.
John, you know, this morning we got an alert here in Abu Dhabi. We've got the all clear now, but clearly Iran is still targeting various countries here in the region. What are you experiencing there in Doha?
Yeah, Lenny, let's start with the UAE. I know you guys received those alarms in Abu Dhabi. Team members also receiving, I'm just getting a bit of feedback here, also receiving alarms in Dubai and Sharjah as well. We know that the UAE successfully intercepted 9 missiles and 109 drones yesterday. In Saudi Arabia, you mentioned those drones heading to the Sheba oil field. This is a massive oil and gas field in Saudi's empty quarter out in the desert. It's operated by Saudi Aramco. They put out, about 1 million barrels of crude production a day. So developments over there, those have all been intercepted, though, according to the country's Ministry of Defense. Also, additional missiles being sent to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. All of those were intercepted as well. Over in Bahrain, we've heard reports of alarms sounding throughout the capital city there, but no reports of missiles or drones as of yet. In Kuwait, the country saying that armed forces yesterday shot down 12 drones and 14 missiles. And here in Qatar, the Ministry of Defense confirming over the course of Friday that 10 drones were launched from Iran. 9 of those successfully intercepted, with 1 hitting an uninhabitable part of the country. Eleni?
The Iran-Israel war. A humanitarian organization based in Norway says that nearly 500,000 people have been displaced now in Lebanon. Israel issued evacuation orders to Beirut's southern suburbs, as well as a large portion of southern Lebanon. Joining us now live from Tel Aviv is Nick Payton-Walsh. And Nick, listen, it seems now that if there was any doubt as to which partner in this war was more aggressive. There's really not much doubt now that, at least in the way they describe it, both U.S. and Israeli leaders are in it for the long haul, it seems.
Quite possibly, Jim, although while I think it's fair to say the Israeli assault against Hezbollah marks a slightly different chapter to the combined operation that's running with the United States against Iran. I think we'll see that probably endure longer than however the conflict with Iran continues. It's interesting you mentioned that people seem to be in this for the long haul, because you could also possibly read today some of the signals emerging from the White House that they want to retain great flexibility to essentially call an end to this any time of their choosing. President Trump's declaration of wanting unconditional surrender was immediately qualified by his press secretary, just said, to safely say he decides that whenever he wants. And if you remember the goals we've been hearing reiterated again and again from senior US officials, destroying Iran's missiles, its navy, and preventing it from having a nuclear weapon. That was reiterated by the White House's social media accounts just today as well. They are clearly saying they've got about 90% reduction in missile and drone launches. They say they've sunk 43 naval ships of Iran's, and it's pretty clear the nuclear program, controversially on the brink of whatever it was prior to this, is significantly taking damage through clearly all these strikes as well. So it's an interesting moment, certainly, because the messaging we're hearing from US officials is one of maximum bravado and commitment to pushing forwards, demanding full surrender, while at the same time, President Trump is also discussing, too, who he'd quite like to be the next supreme leader of Iran. And that has the flavor of some kind of political discussion in the wings as well. So it's clear that we're seeing a very degraded Iran now, quite possibly because of these strikes, still trying to lash out. We just over here saw interceptions flying over our heads, actually, the second of two quite significant salvos we've seen today here. Iran's certainly not out, but it seems that frequency of these kind of attacks reduced, Jim.
Welcome back to a special edition of Out Front. War with Iran. Tonight, northern Iraq is under attack. A drone just exploding near a hotel in Erbil. Erbil is the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan. Now, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad in Iraq had just issued an urgent warning about explosions at hotels. And then after there was that drone at a hotel, a pro-Iranian militant group in Iraq now is claiming responsibility for the drone attacks and warning American troops and contractors that it would continue to target hotels across the country. Stunning, frightening, and also a sense of the chaos unfolding. I want to go now to Clarissa Ward. She is out front in Erbil, Iraq. And Clarissa, those drones targeting hotels, how much are attacks intensifying where you are in Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan tonight?
Well, Aaron, this was about 4 or 5 hours ago that we saw this notification basically telling people to be aware that hotels with foreigners staying in them could be under attack from Iranian-backed Iraqi militias. It's important to remember, Aaron, that there are a lot of contractors, a lot of American contractors who were working on U.S. bases until recently and who have been moved to hotels since this war began. Not literally 2 hours after that alert and warning went out, 4 drones were fired into central Erbil. Most of them were intercepted, but one of them exploded next to a Rotana hotel in the center of town. And this really sending a chill down a lot of people's spines here, because it's the first time here in Erbil, or northern Iraq, that we have seen a civilian target attacked like this. And now the sense is what to do with all these, not just contractors, business people who are in this area, who are obviously staying in hotels, and for many who have yet to find a clear and obvious way out, Aaron.
Yes. All right. Now, you were also, Clarissa, at the site of where a missile landed. So we'll show everyone the footage there, take a look at the impact. I mean, tell us what happened there and what you're learning now.
So earlier today, Iran basically warning the whole of Kurdistan that if any of these Iranian Kurdish groups launch attacks or launch some kind of a ground offensive into Iran, that all facilities in this region will be targeted. And we actually went to one of those Iranian Kurdish bases and saw for ourselves what that kind of damage looks like, because these camps have been coming under regular attack.
So Ward is in Erbil, Iraq, where a hotel was hit by drone debris. And for the first time since the war began, we have live reporting from Tehran. Fred Pleitgen is there for us. I want to go first to Clarissa Ward. Clarissa, we mentioned there was an incident at a hotel in Erbil. What happened?
So this was earlier on in the evening, Anderson. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad issued an alert warning people that effectively they believed there was a high risk of attacks on hotels in the Kurdistan area where high concentrations of foreigners are staying. Literally 2 hours after receiving this notification, 4 drones attacked central Erbil. They were all intercepted, but one of them did explode next to a Rotana hotel in the center of town. This obviously is making a lot of people very nervous, Anderson, because here in northern Iraq, this is the first time that we have seen a civilian target attacked in this way, and it's certainly the first time we have seen groups, and these are believed to be Iran-backed militias in Iraq, explicitly saying that they are going to attack these hotels. Now, the reason that they're giving for going after these hotels, Anderson, is that there is a large number of American contractors and other contractors as well who, up until this war began, were working on bases around this area, but who have subsequently been moved into hotels
in Iran, with hundreds of strikes around the Lebanese capital. Israel has ordered the evacuation of entire Beirut neighborhoods and other parts of the country. Thousands of people have fled, and there is panic and large traffic jams as many try to get out. Matthew Chance has more from there.
OK, we've got to go because they said there's been a warning from the Israelis that there could be a strike coming in. So we're going to get out of here, Alex.
Where they are going?
I don't know, but we need to get out. Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
No, but we've just been trying to film at this location here in Dahir, and we've been told to move away quickly now. Yeah. People were showing us their phones saying, look, there's a warning coming in. Go around this guy. We've come into what is the most dangerous part of the Lebanese capital, which is a very important stronghold of Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed militia group. It's the place where Israel has been focusing, and you can hear the gunshots outside there, that Israel has been focusing its activity, its intensive campaign of airstrikes against the Hezbollah group. That's often, we're told, a warning to local residents who don't have cell phones or don't have that communication to tell them there may be an Israeli strike incoming. So we're going to get out of here. I mean, this chaos that we're getting a glimpse of in South Beirut, it's all happening, remember, because in the hours after the Iranian supreme leader was killed last weekend in those US and Israeli airstrikes in Iran, Hezbollah, which hadn't struck at Israel since 2024, fired rockets and drones across the border into Israel. And this has been the response. Israel is absolutely pounding South Beirut, forcing thousands of people out of their homes and really dragging Lebanon into a conflict that many Lebanese tell us they're not ready for and they do not want. All right, well, Dahir and the surrounding areas has hundreds of thousands of residents, and we were in a long traffic jam, I can tell you, trying to get out of there. Israel has also ordered the evacuation of vast areas of southern Lebanon, nearer to the Israeli border, to make way for military action there as well. And of course, causing a mass displacement of people, now trying desperately to escape the intensifying line of fire.
Thousands of Iranians filled a central square in Tehran today, a very public show of support for the new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, son of the late supreme leader. According to Iranian state media, similar rallies were held in the city of Esfahan and other parts of the country. CNN has a team on the ground in Iran. Fred Pleitkin and photojournalist Claudia Otto are in Tehran. Their movements are monitored by the Iranian government. Today, Fred talked with the top official who said that Iran is prepared for a long war and claimed the regime is still intact.
Iran has a new supreme leader. What does that mean for your military effort and the confrontation with the United States and Israel?
That means the system is quite functioning.
Fred Pleitkin joins us. Now, so you attended that rally that was in support of the supreme leader. What was it like?
It was huge. It was massive. There were thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people, Anderson, who turned out. It was in Engelab Square, which is Revolutionary Square, obviously celebrating the Islamic Revolution. And there really was a twofold message. On the one hand, people there were mourning the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the late supreme leader, who of course was killed in an airstrike a little over a week ago, and then also pledging allegiance to the new supreme leader, to Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, who of course is the second eldest son of the late supreme leader. A lot of people there were very angry at the current situation, I have to say. A lot of the people were pretty charged up, screaming death to America, death to Israel, certainly a lot more so and a lot more forcefully than we've witnessed in the past. And we've been at a lot of events similar to this one in the past. It was very large, and you could tell that the people there were really angry at the Trump administration, were very angry, obviously, at Israel as well. But at the same time, also tried to project that the governing forces here are still very much in control, Anderson, and also that there is a succession in place and that the leadership here in this country is still very much intact.
Front, the war with Iran. We're live in the Middle East in Tel Aviv tonight with breaking news. The United States military just says that it has hit more than 5,000 individual targets in Iran since the beginning of the war. That's 5,000 in just these past 10 days. That means 2,000 targets have been between today and Friday. So, and tonight, as Fred reporting on the ground, he says the most intense night of strikes that he's experienced there. U.S. Central Command also says that more than 50 Iranian ships have been damaged or destroyed. Their numbers of how many are in the Navy have shifted over time, but they are now consistent in saying it is fully destroyed. Nick Payton-Walsh is out front with me in Tel Aviv. And Nick, the other front here is a very significant one. And, you know, I know we talk about it, but it is very important. You have soldiers here, ground invasion, and an all-out war going on with Hezbollah in Lebanon. So you went up right along the front line on the border today.
That's true, and I think it's a sort of a sense of exactly how the unintended consequences, the ancillary parts of this conflict can continue to grow as we get into 9 to 10 days here now. The war between Hezbollah and Israel was a result of Hezbollah saying they would avenge the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, but it is now in full flow, and you get a sense of what this is becoming for Israel now, a really serious issue that it said it will deal with, but is increasingly, I think, potentially finding to be an escalatory conflict. Here's what we saw along the border.
As the war fast spills over and twists, here Hezbollah rockets meet Israeli air defense, the fight thickening on the northern border Sunday night.
I've been hearing that for about an hour now. Probably airstrikes over there in southern Lebanon.
Blasts through the dark. With daylight, it persisted, joined by Apache attack helicopters throwing defensive flares, as Israel said it had overnight led its second targeted raid on the Iranian ally here. Small arms fire close by. Israel has demanded much of southern Lebanon empty out, but there were no open signs they were yet here in number enough for a full invasion. Instead, picking off targets. The goal, to disarm Hezbollah forever, not yet in reach, their rockets constant.
right over our head.
The house where we took cover had 28 alerts last night.
How long is it? It's like about 10 seconds.
No, it's immediate. You need to hear the more that I hear the siren, but it's the moment that you need to be inside shelter.
Don't you get tired of this?
We get tired. We don't have any choice. Yeah. It's our home.
Now, we understand from my colleagues here that Israel is weighing whether or not it might push deeper into Lebanon to essentially reduce the ability for rockets, missiles like that to harass communities in the border areas. But it's an enormous undertaking, Erin, because they don't clearly have the ground troops that we could see publicly to do something like that. And it's another example of how this conflict between the US, Israel and Iran has all these different potential that could cause it to spiral or have dynamics that don't let President Trump's off-ramp seem so easy.
And you see that, and then here, as you came back here, we had the busy, the most intense couple hours we've had of air raid sirens.
We are waiting to see what happens before we hit them. We could take them all out in one day, but it's all resulting in a 90% decline in various things, but in particular, Iranian missile launchers, and 83% drop in drone launchers. As you know, the drone launchers are pretty well shot, but we're at over 90% decline in the Iranian missile launchers, which is very hard to reproduce and very hard to get. And usually what we were able to do through great equipment, a lot of smart people, as soon as they sent a missile up from a launcher, we were able to knock out that launcher within a period of 5 minutes or less, accurately right on the noggin. So now we have low-cost interceptors effectively combating Iranian drones, and our B-2 bombers recently dropped dozens of 2,000-pound bombs to destroy missile launchers all over Iran and buried deep under Iranian soil in many cases. The soil was no match. And we're also annihilating the manufacturing base that the regime uses to build drones and missiles at a rate that nobody thought was possible. We're knocking them out. We know where they all are. We're knocking them out very quickly. We're ahead of our initial timeline by a lot. We probably would not have thought after a month we'd be here. In addition to the fact that we've taken out the leadership twice and maybe 3 times. And we, as you know, we want to be involved. We don't want another president that maybe wouldn't be willing to do what I'm willing to do for the good of the world, for the good of our nation, to be stuck with the situation in 5 years or 10 years from now. So we think they should put a president in, or the head of the country in, that's going to be able to do something peacefully for a change. They've been doing this for 47 years, killing people for 47 years. Whether it's the barracks or even the SS Cole, where they were involved very strongly, they always denied it. But where they were very strongly involved, and all of the people that died through the roadside bombs, died and are right now walking around with no legs, no arms, a face that's been so badly damaged. The Iranian regime has been attacking Americans and spreading terror for 47 years, and despite these countless opportunities to renounce their nuclear ambitions, which they had just a short while ago, they told Mr. Witkoff, who is standing right over here, they said, they actually said, we want to keep building. Essentially, in a real nutshell, we want to continue to build nuclear weapons. If we didn't knock out Midnight Hammer, if we didn't knock out their Iranian potential, if we didn't do that with Midnight Hammer, they would have had a nuclear weapon. They would have used it long before now. And at a minimum, Israel would have been annihilated. I was very lucky that we had the courage to do that we had the talented pilots and the great equipment. The B-2 bombers are unbelievable. We ordered 25 more, by the way. The newer, better version. It's we have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest equipment in the world by far. You see that no matter where we go. You still need the people, though, to operate it and to use it. And those are the people that we cherish. Even after we obliterated their key nuclear sites in Operation Midnight Hammer, they never negotiated in good faith. They still continued to say, we want to build nuclear, we want enrichment at levels that were unacceptable. And they even turned down an offer for unlimited free nuclear fuel forever for civilian purposes. We had people offering them free nuclear fuel. They weren't interested in that because they wanted to build a nuclear weapon. So instead, the regime was trying to reconstitute its weapons program at a different site. They couldn't go back to where they were, the 3 sites that we obliterated, but they were starting work at another site, a different site, different kind of a site, and that was protected by granite. They wanted it protected. Granite's pretty good, but they wanted it protected by a lot deeper. They wanted to go a lot deeper, and they started the process while rapidly building conventional ballistic missiles. They were going to do it all at the same time that threatened our overseas bases and soon could have reached even our homeland. The regime's intention was to use this exponentially growing ballistic missile threat to make it virtually impossible to prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. So as you probably saw, they had a tremendous number of missiles, most of which are now being used or destroyed, and very unsuccessfully used because we have been able, for the most part, to shoot them all down. What incredible technology. The Patriots have been unbelievable, and other things. And the laser technology that we have now is incredible. It's coming out pretty soon. Where literally lasers will do the work of, at a lot less cost, do the work of what the Patriots are doing or what other things are doing. The situation was very quickly approaching the point of no return, and the United States found it intolerable, in my opinion, based on what Steve and Jared and Pete and others were telling me, Marco, so involved, that I thought that they were going to attack us. I thought they would, if we didn't do this at the time we did it, I think they had in mind to attack us. And if you notice, they did something which was very foolish, very stupid, I would say. They attacked their neighbors. And their neighbors were largely neutral, or at least weren't going to be involved, and they got attacked. And it had the reverse effect. The neighbors came onto our side and started attacking them, and actually quite successfully. If you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at UAE, Qatar, and others, but they were strong and they were smart, but they got attacked. Nobody, when I first heard it, I said, no, somebody made a mistake. There was no mistake. UAE had over 1,000 missiles shot at it, knocked them almost all down. On the very first day I came down the escalator in 2015, I said, quote, I will stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and all I'm doing is keeping my promise. Think of that. That was in 2015. I said it. It was a threat then and a much bigger threat now, but no longer a threat, not for a long time anyway. We want to keep it that way. As we continue Operation Epic Fury, we're also focused on keeping energy and oil flowing to the world, and I will not allow a terrorist regime to hold the world hostage and attempt to stop the globe's oil supply. And if Iran does anything to do that, they'll get hit at a much, much harder level. I will take out those targets that were easy and that I mentioned just before. We'll take them out so quickly, they'll never be able to recover, ever. If they want to play that game, they better not play that game. In the long run, oil supplies will be dramatically more secure without the threat of Iranian ships, drones, missiles, nuclear menace, or anything. So the Strait of Hormuz is going to remain safe. We have a lot of Navy ships there. We have the best equipment in the world, inspecting for mines. Again, most of their ships are down at the bottom of the sea, but we will hit them so hard that it will not be possible for them or anybody else helping them to ever recover that section of the world if they do anything. In recent years, the regime and its terror proxies have launched attacks on hundreds of commercial vessels. We're putting an end to all of this threat once and for all, and the result will be lower oil prices, oil and gas prices for American families. We've done that. We've done it. We brought it very low. This was just an excursion into something that had to be done. We're getting very close to finishing that, too. In the meantime, during this brief disruption, the United States is offering political risk insurance to any tankers operating in the Gulf. So we're putting up risk insurance. We'll perhaps go alongside of them for protection. We don't think it'll be necessary if it is. And if they do anything, the price will be incalculable. It will be so great that they will have wished they never did it, because you have to keep the straits flowing. With all of that, it affects other countries much more than it does the United States. It doesn't really affect us. We have so much oil and gas, much more than we need. We have Venezuela now as our new partner, great partner. They've worked out so wonderful. We're working with the administration, the president, and it's a massive source of oil, gas, everything. But we're in a very good position, but very unfair to other parts of the world, like China as an example. I mean, we're doing this for the other parts of the world, including countries like China. They get a lot of their oil through the straits. So we're doing this. We have a very good relationship with President Xi in China. I'm going there in a short period of time, and we're protecting the world from what these lunatics are trying to do, and very successfully, I might add. We're also waiving certain oil-related sanctions to reduce prices. So we have sanctions on some countries. We're going to take those sanctions off till this straightens out. Then who knows, maybe we won't have to put them on. There'll be so much peace. But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. I hope it's not going to be needed, but if it's needed, we'll escort them right through. And we have the greatest mine-sweeping ability. We have the greatest ships, and all of the, we know exactly where they're placed. We'll get them out of there very fast, but we hope we don't have any of that. And again, if they do that, if they play that game, we're going to hit them at a level that they have not seen before. So we're winning very decisively. We're way ahead of schedule. Our military is the greatest in the world, with the greatest equipment and the greatest people in the world. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Iran's a very powerful country. They were going to take over the Middle East. If we did not hit them, they were going to take over the Middle East. They had thousands and thousands since their last hit. They had thousands and thousands of missiles and everything else. Most are now destroyed. But they were going to take over the Middle East. Those weapons were aimed at Middle Eastern countries that had nothing to do with this. They were going to take over the Middle East, and they were going to try and destroy Israel. So we stopped it with good timing, and we're very proud to be involved in this, and it's going to be ended soon. And if it starts up again, they'll be hit even harder. Thank you very much for being here. Go ahead. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Do you approve of Iran's new supreme leader? And secondly, can you tell us more about your call with Russian President Vladimir Putin today?
Yes.
What did you discuss?
Yes, I had a very good call with President Putin. We had a lot of people on the line from our side, from his side. We were talking about Ukraine, which is just a never-ending fight. And look, there's tremendous hatred between President Putin and President Zelensky. They can't seem to get it together. But I think it was a positive call on that subject. And we obviously talked then about the Middle East. And he wants to be helpful. I said, you could be more helpful by getting the Ukraine-Russia war over with. That would be more helpful. But we had a very good talk, and he wants to be very constructive. Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Iran, you called it an excursion. You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very
to...
soon. Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. In fact, there are two levels of leadership, and even actually, as it turns out, more than that. But two levels of leadership are gone. Most people have never even heard about the leaders that they're talking about. So it's obviously been very, very powerful, very effective.
To Cuba, you said that Cuba wants to make a deal.
Yes.
What would the United States get in return for that, and why should Americans trust Marco Rubio to negotiate it?
Well, Marco Rubio is doing a great job. I think he's going to go down as the greatest Secretary of State in history. Look at what we've done as a presidency. Look at what we've done as an administration. They trust Marco, and so do the American people trust. He's been successful no matter where he's been. He also speaks the language, which is always nice and always helpful. But he's dealing, and it may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter, because they're down to, as they say, fumes. They have no energy. They have no money. They're in deep trouble on a humanitarian basis. And we don't want to see that, but they were very, very bad to a lot of people, as you know, and a lot of people living on the Cuban-American vote, which I got at record levels. Very important. Those people are very important to me. I know what they went through. They went through hell. Some of them have gone on to be some of the most successful people in the country. Cuban-American business people, some of them are like the most successful in the country. And a lot of them are friends of mine, because I've been fighting this battle with them for a long time. The Castro regime was brutal, but they lived off Venezuela. Now they don't live off Venezuela. Sends them no energy, no fuel, no oil, no money, no nothing. They lived without Venezuela. They couldn't have made it. And we cut them off from everything else. So, yeah, they're going to make either a deal or we'll do it just as easy anyway. Yeah. Please, go ahead.
Tomahawk missile likely destroyed that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I haven't seen it. And I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries. You know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more. But whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries. But that's being investigated right now. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
It's the beginning of building a new country. But they have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft equipment. It's all been blown up. They have no radar, they have no telecommunications, and they have no leadership. It's all gone. So, you could look at that statement. We could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further. But the big risk on that war has been over for 3 days. We wiped them out in the first 2 days. When you think about it, it's incredible. We wiped out a big Navy, very powerful Navy. These were ships. These were serious ships. These were ships that you buy when you want to win battles. They're all on the bottom floor. The sailors are all running off the ships. They refuse to get on the ships. The Air Force is gone. Everything's gone. The missiles are down to a trickle. The drones are down to probably 25, and they'll soon be down to nothing. We'll have where they manufactured the drones are under fire as we speak. They're being hit. So the rest is going to be determination as to my attitude, along with the people in the Trump administration, what we want to do. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Can I ask you, you mentioned you were going to waive certain additional oil waivers or sanctions. Can you talk a little bit more about that and address in particular?
Well, we're looking to keep the oil prices down. We went artificially up because of this excursion into a very positive thing. I mean, this was an excursion that a lot of people wouldn't have done. I knew oil prices would go up if I did this, and they've gone up probably less than I thought they'd go up. But I don't think anybody thought we were going to be this quickly successful. This was a military success, the likes of which people haven't seen. We have the best military. We have the best equipment. We have, I believe, the best generals. We have the best. And this went very quickly. We talked about that with President Putin. He was very impressed with what he saw, because nobody's ever seen anything quite like it. You know, Iran was a very powerful military country with all of the missiles. Now, you had the double attack. You had the original attack with us and Israel, and that knocked them for a loop. Then you had the B-2 bombers, which took out their nuclear capability, and they would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks to 4 weeks. And they would have used it long before this press conference. And we might have had a much different press conference if we had a press conference at all. But it's been amazing. The military success that we've had is truly unprecedented.
You've told your congressional colleagues that you will not sign any piece of legislation until the Save America Act is passed. Does that include the confirmation of Senator Mullen as your next DHS secretary? Does that mean a DHS funding bill? And Senator Thune said today it's not a matter of whether or not your Republican colleagues agree with the policy, it's about changing the process. In other words, getting rid of the filibuster to get there.
So in order to get it, you're going to need Democrat votes. And what we're saying is the Save America, not the SAVE Act, which nobody knew what it was, the Save America Act, the Save America Act. And that's voter ID. We want voter ID. When a voter, we want to be able to see a picture of the voter. We want to be able to see that the voter is legitimate. We want, very importantly, confirmation that this voter is a citizen of the United States of America. And we want no mail-in ballot scams. So we have exceptions for the military, for sick, for disabled, and for people that are away, business trips or whatever. Even vacations will be very liberal in that. We've added two things to it: no men and women's sports and no transgender mutilization of our children. We don't want it's mutilization of our children, and we don't want that. So we added those two things. That's the 5 points. We have 5 very good points. It polls at 86% with Democrats. Think of that. The overall vote is 86%. With Republicans, it's 98%. And the only one opposed to it is a Democrat leadership because they cheat. They want to cheat. So we added those 2 points. We're going for the gold, and we're going to have to fight like hell. Now, certain things will happen. Certain things will take place. I'm here to do a great job for the country. But we don't have a country, if we're going to have elections that are so corrupt and so dishonest like we've witnessed over the last period of time. You know, as an example, virtually nobody has nobody has a system of mail-in ballots like we have. No other country in the world. France went away from it. They all went, you know why? Because it's corrupt. And Jimmy Carter, when he had a commission, frankly, I think it's probably the best thing Jimmy Carter did. He said, you can't have mail-in voting because it's inherently dishonest. And it's turned out to be totally dishonest, so we're going to fight for it. Yeah.
Activated any sleeper cells inside the U.S. There's reports that they have pressed that trigger button to activate those cells, at least abroad.
Well, they've been trying for a long time. We've been very much on top of it. One of the things we have to do is get the Democrats to stop the Democrat shutdown, because, as you know, the apparatus that looks into that, Schumer and the Democrats have shut it down, which tells you they probably hate our country a lot. But the Democrats have to open that up. But we've got very, very good intelligence into that. We know a lot of different things that have happened that have been very bad. A lot of them came in during the Biden open border period, but we have them under, we've got them, we're watching every single one of them. Yeah, we know a lot about them. The biggest problem we have is the Democrat shutdown. We know a lot about them, but the shutdown doesn't allow us to do what we have to do.
Have to take him out. Does he have a target on his back?
You mean the new Supreme Leader? You mean the son?
How can there be an Iran with
well,
another
I don't want to say that, but you know, I was disappointed because we think it's going to lead to just more of the same problem for the country. So I was disappointed to see their choice.
You've said you have someone in mind to be the new Iranian leadership, if not the Ayatollah's son. What are you looking for in that person? Are you looking at someone internal, given that you just said that their leadership has been decided?
I like the idea of, you know, internal and eternal, come to think of it. But I like the idea of internal because it works well. I mean, I think we've proven that so far in Venezuela. We have a woman, Delcy, who has been, president of the country, very respected, she's doing a great job. And it's, no disruption. We had, as you remember, Iraq, where everybody got fired. The military got fired, the police got fired, the politicians got fired. There was nobody. And you know what they turned into? ISIS. And we don't want that. We don't want that. So I would like to see people that are inside go. Now, they talk about the son of the Shah. They talk about other people. But, hasn't been there in many, many years. We have a formula that's been very good so far, and I think it'll continue to be good. The relationship is extraordinary with Venezuela, smart country. We've taken out 100 million barrels of oil. It's right now in Houston being taken care of and made so beautiful. And you have to see this at work. They have, it's brought to the refineries. It's being refined in Houston, which is made exactly for that product. And so far, but it's 100 million barrels of oil, and now they have another 100 million barrels coming. And it's like a partnership. We're getting along so well with them. It's great for Venezuela, and it's great for the United States. Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. President, you just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report. Yeah, please.
You said earlier that we've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. What do you consider enough? What's your baseline?
Where they're not going to be starting the following day to develop a nuclear weapon. Where they'll look at that man and some other people from the administration and say, all right, we're not going to do it. They were not willing to say that. And when Steve called up and he said that to me, I said, well, here we go. Let's do it the hard way. But the hard way, I think, is probably the easy way. When basically I can see that they will no longer have any capacity whatsoever for a very long period of time of developing weaponry that could be used against the United States, Israel, or any of our allies. We have great allies in the Middle East, great countries that are allies. And they were staying out of it until they got hit. Someday they'll have to do a story. Why did he do that? Why did they do that? But they were going to hit them. If I didn't hit them first, they were going to hit our allies first. I believe, upon information and belief, but I believe that he was going to, they were going to take over the Middle East. They were looking to take over the Middle East. Now, had Operation Midnight Hammer not taken place, that was definite, because they would have had a nuclear weapon within a matter of weeks. But that took place. That was a setback. But look at the number of missiles they were able to buy and make over the last 6 months. And those missiles were aimed at various countries. And when you look at over 1,000 missiles shot at like UAE, they were looking to take over the Middle East. We got there first. We're lucky. I'll tell you what, the Middle East and those countries, very rich countries, are very lucky that I was president instead of somebody else.
To U.S. action in Iran?
I don't think so, no. No, we get along very well on this. He was, I would say, philosophically a little bit different than me. I think he was maybe less enthusiastic about going, but he was quite enthusiastic. But I felt it was something we had to do. I didn't feel we had a choice. If we didn't do it, they would have done it to us. I felt, based on the negotiations that were being had by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Marco and Pete and everybody was involved. I felt that they were looking to tap us along before they hit, and I thought they were going to hit. And if they hit us first, that would have been a very bad thing. In the back, please, in the back. About the Strait, you mean? Yeah, well, I want to keep it open. I want to keep it good. You know, it doesn't pertain to us so much as it does to China. We're really helping China here and other countries because they get a lot of their energy from the Straits. But, hey, look, we have a good relationship with China. It's my
You have called him an unacceptable choice. So does he have a target on his back? And how can you say
I don't want to say whether or not he does because that would be inappropriate. But, hey, look, I had a target on my back because, as you people wrote pretty well, they caught the assassin that was after me. So we just got them first. But they caught the assassin. They have him now in custody that was after me. So, you know, but people don't like to mention that, but they did catch him. And I'd like to congratulate our military, Secret Service, FBI, all of the people that worked on that, but they did. Yeah, please. Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You promised the Iranian people you would help them, but it sounds like you're willing to end this fight after your military objectives have wrapped up. Isn't that a betrayal of the people?
Will I help them? I'd like to, if they can behave, but they've been very menacing. You know, they're great people. They have an amazing population. It's amazing, smart, brilliant, energetic. They have a great, I'd love to help them, but they have to be in a system that allows them to be helped. And right now they're in a system that only allows failure. And I don't want that. And I want a system that's not going to be attacking us. We want a system that can lead to many years of peace. And if we can't have that, we might as well get it over with right now. Yeah, please.
President, as of today, there have been 8 U.S. military fatalities associated with the war in Iran. How many American deaths are you willing to have in this war?
Well, as I said before, when you have conflicts like this, you always have death. And I was at Dover yesterday. I met the parents, and they were unbelievable people. They were unbelievable people, but they all had one thing in common. They said to me one thing, every single one, finish the job, sir. Please finish the job. And I'll leave you at that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
You've been listening to President Trump in Doral, Florida, talking to reporters about the U.S. war on Iran. The president began his remarks by saying, quote, "We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete," unquote, which is, of course, a contradiction from what the Secretary of Defense and the Pentagon have been saying about how this is only beginning. When pressed on whether he thought the war would be over this week, the president said no, but soon. He didn't go into detail about what soon means. When asked to explain why Secretary Hegseth said the war was just beginning, President Trump said, "It's the beginning of building a new country." When asked by CNN's Manu Raju if the United States would accept any responsibility on that deadly strike on an Iranian school if it was proven to have been caused by the U.S., the president suggested without evidence that it might have been Iran. Other countries have access to that missile, the Patriot missile. He said it's still being investigated. He later said, quote, "Whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report," unquote. The president also says he was disappointed to see that Iran's new supreme leader, named by the Council of Elders, is the son of the Ayatollah who had just been killed 2 Saturdays ago. The president said Iran should put in a leader who could do things differently for a change. Let's bring in my panel of experts who are all standing by here. Caitlin Collins, of course, foremost among them. Caitlin, president's been talking to reporters every single day with varying messages. He talked to Dana, he talked to me, he talked to CBS News just a few hours ago, in which he said this is almost over. He seemed to be suggesting it's almost complete. What do you make of the tone he just struck?
Well, I think the question that a lot of the reporters had were in the conflicting messages that we've heard from the Pentagon saying that this is a war that is just getting started, to what the president was saying to CBS News earlier when he was saying that it's nearly complete. I thought it was interesting there during that press conference with reporters where he kind of set the bar at saying that Iran should have no capability of having weapons that can be used to attack not just the United States, but he also pointed out Israel and other neighboring countries, other U.S. allies that are in the region that we've seen obviously coming under fire from these Iranian missiles in recent days. That obviously seems to be a high bar, so it's a question of what this looks like.
That means taking out all of their ballistic missiles, right?
Well, because obviously it's much easier to hit somewhere in the region,
Right.
Israel, for example, than it is the United States. But another reporter followed up because the president did say he thought that the war would end soon and asked if he envisioned that being this week. He seemed to say no, but he did say that it could be over soon. One thing, though, is that the president has obviously had a vested interest in who leads Iran, and his son being named the new supreme leader. President Trump just told reporters there he was disappointed by that. I thought what was most striking, though, in the president's remarks also was he was pressed on these analyses and intelligence and reports that people have looked at on who is responsible for the strike on the girls' school in Iran that happened the first day of the war. The president said on Saturday to reporters that he believed it was Iran that was actually responsible for that. There's been more analysis since it has shown it was a Tomahawk missile, which obviously the United States...
Oh, that's what I meant. Tomahawk, yeah. Sorry.
That's what the United States has been using in this. I don't think Iran is known to have any Tomahawk missiles. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but that's what the public reporting suggests. And so when the president was just asked about that by Sean McCreesh, who followed up on Manu's question about it, he said, I just don't know enough about it. He said, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report, and noted that it is still under investigation. So he didn't even seem as confident as he seemed on Saturday, and that it was Iran that was behind that. Because obviously our analysis of the geolocated images and others, the New York Times, Reuters, has said that it was the United States military that was most likely responsible. Obviously, there's been no confirmation of that yet.
Yeah, and just earlier today, CNN reported that the U.S. hit an IRGC base adjacent to the school.
Yeah, they're extremely close.
Yeah, so that could explain some of that. Caitlin, thank you so much. And don't miss Caitlin on her show, The Source with Caitlin Collins. It airs at 9 p.m. Her guests tonight include Democratic Senators Tim Kaine and Adam Schiff and Cory Booker and Tammy Baldwin. They are all making a joint appearance. That's to discuss the strike on the grade school. Is that why? Or
well, they actually want to start holding votes on Capitol Hill if the Senate leader John Thune is not willing to hold public hearings where Rubio has to come testify and Pete Hegseth has to come testify on this. They said the closed-door briefings are not sufficient for them. They want public hearings, and if they don't get that, they're going to put up a bunch of votes where basically Republicans have to go on the record about what they support.
Well, the more transparency, the better for the American people. That's tonight at 9 Eastern, only on CNN. Let's go live to CNN's Fred Pleitgen. He's on the ground in Tehran, Iran, with photojournalist Claudia Otto. And CNN, we should note, is operating in Iran with the permission of the Iranian government, as is required for any reporter in Iran. CNN is maintaining full editorial control over what we report. We are there because we think that you, the viewer, have the right to see what is happening on the streets of Tehran and also see from that side the effectiveness of the U.S. campaign. Fred, President Trump says he thinks the war will be over, quote, soon. How does that square with what you are seeing and hearing there in Iran?
Well, we're certainly hearing a lot of kinetic activity tonight. One of the interesting things that I picked up from that press conference is that I think President Trump was saying that some of Iran's capabilities were being hit even as he was speaking. One of the things that I can say is that there were massive airstrikes going on tonight, I would say for about an hour or an hour and a half here around the Iranian capital. In fact, the building that we're staying in was really shaking for a lot of those times that we were hearing those thuds. We were hunkered down here for an extended period of time. From what we're gathering right now, it seems to have been in the eastern part of the city, the northeastern part of the city. And then also there are reports that Tehran's Mehrabad airport, which is sort of the second city airport here in this city, was apparently hit as well. There's also reports of a town that's, I would say, about an hour's drive to the west of here called Karaj, apparently also taking some pretty big hits. But on the whole, Jake, one of the things we have to say is that the leadership here is definitely trying to project that they still are very much in control. President Trump mentioned mentioned it. We know it. There's a new supreme leader here in Iran, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, of course, the son of the late supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was voted in yesterday. And today there were big demonstrations here in Tehran and other Iranian cities with people pledging their allegiance to the supreme leader, obviously organized by the government. However, the turnout was certainly massive, at least from the event that we were in, which was in a place called Revolutionary Square here in Tehran, Engelab Square. So clearly the leadership is saying they have a president in place. They have the head of their Supreme National Security Council in place, Ali Larijani. They have a supreme leader in place as well. And they certainly have a military that they say is still capable of striking back and still is capable of striking those missiles. And one thing I want to add, Jake, one thing that we're not seeing here is the dissolution of of public order here in Tehran. There's a lot of security forces that are on the ground. There's a lot of checkpoints that are on the ground. So clearly also here to the local population, to the Iranian population, the leadership of this country is also trying to project that they are still very much in control of this country, Jake.
Fred, President Trump said he was disappointed by this election of Mojtaba Khamenei, the new supreme leader, the son of the recently killed Ayatollah, as you noted. What does the selection of Mojtaba Khamenei signal for the future of this conflict with the U.S. and Israel? He is considered over here in the United States to be a hardliner.
Yeah, he's certainly considered to be exactly that as well here in Iran. Of course, he's much more of a known commodity here to the Iranians. He's been in the orbit of his father, the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, for an extended period of time. He was in very high up in the office of the supreme leader for a long period of time as well. And he's certainly someone who also has the respect of the military and specifically of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which of course is that elite wing, and also the military wing that's responsible for missiles and drones here in this country. But I put that question also to the main advisor to the supreme leader for foreign policy, whom I interviewed today. And he said it shows that the state here is functioning, that there is continuity. But I also asked that advisor where all of this can end, how all of this can end, whether or not any sort of diplomacy might be in sight. And he said, quite frankly, he believed at this point there wasn't. Let's listen in.
Iran. I'm Jim Sciutto in Washington. You've been watching CNN's coverage of President Trump's news conference on the subject of the ongoing war with Iran. President Trump telling reporters that the U.S. military operation is, in his terms, ahead of schedule. He said the U.S. has now struck more than 5,000 targets. He suggested earlier that the war is, quote, pretty well complete, although in this press conference just a few moments ago, he said that we could call it a tremendous success, or we could continue and we're going to go further. So, President leaving something open there as to whether the war is over or not, but certainly leaving the option open to continue. He claimed Iran was going to take over the Middle East, his terms, if the U.S. and Israel did not strike first. President Trump's comments earlier in the day triggered a major reversal on Wall Street. Stocks were well down, but they finished the session up with solid gains. In the oil markets, Brent and U.S. crude fell sharply after they had risen to well over $100 a barrel earlier, as high as around $120. U.S. gas prices, however, continue their march up. The average price for a gallon of gas is now nearing $3.50. It was below $3 just a week ago.
Tonight, and we begin with the breaking news. President Trump, who is facing immense political and economic pressure over his war in Iran, tonight giving wildly conflicting messages.
And will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
So we're going to go further and decisively defeating the enemy, whatever it takes. But 3 hours ago, he told the war is very complete, pretty much. Well, that statement posted by CBS correspondent Weijia Yang was at 3:16 p.m. Well, President Donald Trump knows the timing of that very well. At 3:17 p.m., the Dow Jones Industrial Average shot up, major recovery. Oil went down. Until then, of course, there had been fear, and frankly, overnight in the oil market, panic. Oil had gone well above $100 a barrel. It was absolutely incredible what we witnessed. It was at the highest in 4 years. There was worry and fear and panic, as I said, about a global economic catastrophe. But it is clear tonight, long after the markets have formally closed, that Trump, at least for now, does not have an intention of ramping the war down. In fact, CNN is learning this hour that the Trump administration is considering a highly complex and risky operation to retrieve Iran's known highly enriched uranium. Now, that would be a massive mission. That would require boots on the ground. It would require significant forces, special forces, and it would put a significant number of American ground troops in harm's way. Robert Kelly is a former chief nuclear inspector for the IAEA. He told Outfront that the United States, in his view, probably doesn't even really have a clue where that uranium is. He said, quote, it can be split up into so many batches, so it's probably not all in one place. Seems like a script for a suicide mission with little chance of success. Well, that's his view, but tonight President Trump is taking on Iran's new leadership, including the newly minted supreme leader, warning that he won't hesitate to take down any successor who assumes power without his input.
Their terrorist leaders are gone. We're counting down the minutes until they will be gone.
Well, those comments from Trump come as even more countries have been drawn into the war. British jets took out at least 2 Iranian drones today, one in defense of the country of Jordan, another was heading towards the Gulf state of Bahrain. France, and this is a significant development, some in the shipping industry very focused on this, announcing that it's deploying 10 warships and aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean, Red Sea, and apparently Strait of Hormuz, which is why the shipping community is laser focused on it. NATO air defenses have taken down a missile entering Turkish airspace today as well, which is now the second time that a ballistic missile from Iran was shot down by NATO defenses. And as this war continues with no clear end in sight, we want to show you what is the reality for so many living here. You know, today we visited the site where a person was killed when an Iranian ballistic missile came through, whether it was partially intercepted or appeared to be some sort of a cluster munition. That's a construction site where we were, and just, you know, some piece came through. And you can see all the shrapnel from it. Somebody was working at that site and they're dead. Now, that attack took place in a residential area, and we have seen Iran in these past 72 hours or so, maybe a bit more, using what appear to be cluster-type munitions over civilian areas. Natasha Bertrand is out front live in Washington. Fred Pleitgen is in Tehran, which is under full assault tonight. I want to begin with you, Natasha, because you're breaking this big news, though, on what the Trump administration is considering on the ground in Iran. What have you learned?
Yeah, Aaron, so a big question surrounding this operation, of course, has been what will happen to that highly enriched uranium that Iran still has stockpiles of that could be used ultimately to create a nuclear weapon. Of course, Iran says it's not using it for that purpose, but the risk is there. And the only way to ultimately get that material out of Iran is to send special operators and U.S. ground forces in to actually physically retrieve it. And we're told that that would require